The fluorescent lights of Miller's diner hummed their usual mid-afternoon melody as Sarah Martinez wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day. Outside, the Indiana summer heat shimmered off the asphalt parking lot, making the world beyond the glass windows look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Sarah had worked at Miller's for nearly 15 years, long enough to know every crack in the vinyl booths, every temperamental button on the ancient cash register, and certainly long enough to read people the moment they walked through that door. Her late husband, Marcus, used to joke that she could have been a detective instead of a waitress. "You notice everything, baby?" he'd say with that warm smile of his. "Most people just look. You actually see." Marcus had been a paramedic for 23 years before the heart attack took him 4 years ago. During their marriage, Sarah had absorbed countless stories from his shifts. The close calls, the symptoms that mattered, the signs most people missed. She never imagined that knowledge would one day save a life. If you're enjoying this story of observation, compassion, and split-second decisions that change everything, please hit that subscribe button right now. Now, let's continue with Sarah's extraordinary day. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when the black Mercedes SUV pulled into the parking lot. Sarah noticed it immediately, not because expensive cars were rare in Greenfield, Indiana, but because of how aggressively it parked, taking up 2 spaces at an odd angle. Whoever was driving was either in a hurry or deeply distracted. The door swung open, and a man in an expensive navy suit stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing emphatically at the air. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom, all sharp edges and barely contained stress. But it was the passenger that caught Sarah's attention. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, emerged slowly from the other side of the vehicle. Everything about his movement was wrong. He was hunched slightly, moving with the careful deliberation of someone in pain, and even from across the parking lot Sarah could see how pale he was. Not just pale, but the kind of grayish-white that made her think of milk left too long in the sun. The man, clearly the boy's father, barely glanced at his son as they walked toward the diner entrance, still absorbed in his phone conversation. "I don't care what Henderson says," he barked into the phone. "The merger timeline doesn't change just because their legal team is dragging their feet. We close by Friday or we walk. Period." The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Sarah grabbed 2 menus and approached with her practiced smile. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Just the 2 of you today." The father held up one finger, the universal gesture for "wait, I'm on an important call," and continued his conversation. The boy, however, looked up at Sarah with eyes that made her heart squeeze. There was pain in those eyes and something else. A quiet pleading, as if he wanted help but didn't know how to ask for it. "Booth or counter?" Sarah asked gently, directing the question to the boy. "Booth," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah led them to booth 7, the one by the window with the slightly less faded upholstery. The father, still on his phone, slid in without looking. The boy lowered himself into the seat across from his father with visible discomfort, moving like every inch hurt. Sarah's internal alarm bells started ringing. "I'll give you folks a minute to look over the menu," she said, placing the laminated sheets on the table. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee. Black," the father said, barely pausing his conversation. "Bradley, we've been over this. The Shanghai office needs to understand." He waved his hand dismissively, indicating Sarah should just go. "And for you, sweetheart?" Sarah asked the boy, her voice warm. "Water, please." The boy, not Bradley apparently, despite his father's phone conversation, said quietly, "Just water." Sarah nodded and headed back to the counter, but she couldn't stop watching booth 7. Over the next 5 minutes, as she poured coffee, delivered water, and took the father's hurried order for a club sandwich and fries for both of them, she cataloged everything wrong with the picture. The boy, she'd heard his father call him Tyler on the phone, hadn't touched his water. He sat perfectly still, as if any movement might cause pain. His skin had that concerning pallor, but now, up close under the diner lights, Sarah noticed something else. A faint yellowish tinge around his eyes. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking. But Sarah was always looking. And there was something about the way he was sitting. His right leg was drawn up slightly, his body angled protectively to the left. She'd seen Marcus sit like that once, years ago, when he'd been dealing with kidney stones, that instinctive guarding of an area in pain. Tyler's father, who Sarah had gleaned from his phone conversations, was named William Ashford, and apparently ran some kind of investment firm, showed no signs of ending his marathon business call. He'd moved through topics ranging from stock acquisitions to personnel issues to what sounded like preparations for a charity gala. All while his son sat across from him, barely breathing. When Sarah brought their food, Tyler didn't even look at it. William, still on the phone, gestured impatiently for her to just leave the plates. "Honey, you should try to eat something," Sarah said softly to Tyler. But the boy just shook his head slightly, his jaw tight. She walked back to the counter, but her eyes kept returning to booth 7. The diner was quiet this afternoon. Just old Mr. Peterson at his usual corner table with his crossword puzzle, and a young couple sharing a milkshake by the jukebox. Tammy, the other waitress on shift, was in the back taking her break, which meant Sarah had nothing to distract her from the growing certainty that something was very wrong with that boy. Marcus's voice echoed in her memory from 1,000 dinner table conversations. "Appendicitis is a sneaky bastard, Sarah. Comes on fast, and if you miss it, you're looking at peritonitis, sepsis, death. The classic signs? Guarding the right lower quadrant, pain that migrates from the belly button to the lower right side, loss of appetite, low-grade fever, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes you get a little jaundice if it's been brewing for a while." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She moved to the coffee station, pretending to refill the filters, but positioned herself where she could observe Tyler more directly. The boy had his arms wrapped around his middle now, and his breathing had become shallow. She watched as he shifted in his seat, trying to find a comfortable position that didn't exist, and that's when she saw it clearly. The way he pulled that right leg up, the way his whole body oriented itself around protecting his right side. Every instinct Sarah had developed over 15 years of reading people, every fragment of knowledge she'd absorbed from Marcus, every maternal alarm bell she possessed was screaming at her now. William Ashford was saying something about quarterly projections, completely oblivious. Sarah made her decision. She grabbed a wet cloth and a bottle of water from behind the counter and walked directly to booth 7. Without waiting for an invitation, she set the water down and reached out to place the cool cloth against Tyler's forehead. "Ma'am, what are you?" Tyler started, but Sarah gently shushed him. His skin was warm, not burning but definitely elevated. The yellowish tinge around his eyes was even more apparent up close. "Sir," Sarah said firmly, looking directly at William Ashford. "Sir, I need you to end that call. Right now." William looked up, annoyed and startled. "Hold on, Bradley," he said into the phone, then covered the receiver with his hand. "Excuse me?" "End the call," Sarah repeated, her voice carrying the kind of authority she usually reserved for breaking up fights between drunk customers on Friday nights. "This is an emergency." "An emergency?" William's face flushed. "I'm in the middle of a critical business." "Your son is in crisis," Sarah interrupted, her voice steady but urgent. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, Mr. Ashford. I'm not a doctor, but I was married to a paramedic for 23 years, and I've been watching people in this diner long enough to know when something's seriously wrong." William stared at her, phone still in his hand, caught between irritation and uncertainty. Tyler looked up at Sarah with those pain-filled eyes. "Your son is pale, not just pale but grayish. He has a yellowish tinge around his eyes, which suggests his system is under serious stress. He hasn't touched his food or water. His breathing is shallow. And most importantly," Sarah gestured toward Tyler's posture, "he's guarding his right side. His whole body is protecting that area. Do you see how his leg is drawn up? That's called the psoas sign. It's classic for appendicitis." "Appendicitis." William's face changed from annoyed to concerned. "We have an appointment with a specialist on Friday," the pediatrician said. "Friday might be too late," Sarah said bluntly. "Mr. Ashford, I've seen this before. If his appendix ruptures, you're looking at a life-threatening infection. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm right, every minute counts." Tyler made a small sound, a whimper he tried to suppress. His face had gone even paler, if that was possible, and a sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. William finally lowered his phone. Sarah watched his business executive mask crack as the father underneath emerged. "Tyler? Buddy, how bad is it? Why didn't you say something?" "Didn't want to bother you," Tyler whispered. "You had all those calls. The merger." Sarah felt her heart break a little. She placed a gentle hand on William's arm. "St. Mary's Hospital is 7 minutes from here. I really think you need to take him to the emergency room right now. Not Friday. Not tomorrow. Now." William looked between Sarah and his son, and Sarah could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the weighing of a waitress's instinct against his planned specialist appointment, against the possibility of overreaction, against the disruption to his carefully scheduled day. It was Tyler's next movement that decided it. The boy suddenly doubled over slightly, pressing his hand to his right side, his face contorting with pain he could no longer hide. "Okay," William said, standing abruptly. He tossed his phone onto the table and reached for his son. "Okay. Tyler, come on, buddy. We're going to the hospital." Sarah helped Tyler slide out of the booth, noting how carefully he moved, how much pain each step caused. "Use the back exit," she said. "It's closer to the parking lot. And sir, when you get there, tell them you suspect acute appendicitis with possible perforation risk. Don't let them make you wait. Be insistent." William met her eyes, and Sarah saw real fear there now. "Thank you," he said. "I don't even know your name. Sarah Martinez. But right now, just go. Drive safe, but drive fast." She watched through the window as William helped Tyler into the Mercedes, this time with all the care and attention he should have shown when they arrived. The SUV reversed out of its crooked parking space and disappeared down the road towards St. Mary's, leaving tire marks on the hot asphalt. Sarah stood at the window for a long moment, her heart pounding. She might have just made a fool of herself. The boy might just have a stomach bug. But she didn't think so. Everything Marcus had taught her, everything she'd observed, pointed to something serious. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Tammy asked, emerging from the back room with her apron retied. "I hope so," Sarah said quietly. "I really hope so." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, delivering food, making small talk. But Sarah's mind stayed with Tyler Ashford and his father racing toward the hospital. She found herself praying, something she hadn't done much since Marcus died, that she'd been right to intervene, and more importantly, that they'd made it in time. It was nearly closing time, around 8 p.m., when the bell above the door chimed again. Sarah looked up from cashing out the register to see William Ashford standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie loosened, but his face held an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. She froze, her heart suddenly hammering. Had something gone wrong? Had she been mistaken? Had she sent them on a wild goose chase that ended badly? William walked slowly toward the counter, and Sarah noticed his eyes were red-rimmed. When he spoke, his voice cracked slightly. "You saved my son's life." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "The appendix? Acute appendicitis. Severely inflamed, on the verge of rupture. The ER doctor said if we'd waited even a few more hours." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "They did emergency surgery. He came through fine. He's resting now, my wife is with him, but I had to come back here. I had to thank you." "Oh, thank God," Sarah breathed, gripping the counter for support. "I'm so glad he's okay. The doctor said." William paused, seeming to struggle with emotion. "The doctor said that the pediatrician we saw yesterday completely missed it. Told us it was probably just stress from school, that Tyler was a perfectionist who made himself anxious. We had a specialist appointment scheduled for Friday, like I mentioned, but that was for his anxiety. If you hadn't said something, if you hadn't pushed me to take him seriously," he shook his head. "I don't even want to think about it." "You're his father," Sarah said gently. "You made the right choice when it mattered. After you basically hit me over the head with it," William said, and there was no accusation in his voice, only gratitude. I was so wrapped up in my work, so focused on this merger, that I wasn't seeing my own son. Tyler told me later that he'd been hurting since yesterday morning. He didn't want to bother me because he knew I had important meetings. What kind of father makes his kid feel like his health is a bother? Sarah came around the counter and gestured to a nearby booth. Sit down, Mr. Ashford. You look like you could use some coffee. On the house. William sat heavily, and Sarah brought him a fresh cup. He wrapped his hands around it like a lifeline. I've spent my whole career making decisions, analyzing situations, managing crises, but I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You, a waitress I'd never met before, saw it in minutes. Marcus used to say the best diagnostics in the world don't mean anything if nobody's actually looking at the patient, Sarah said, sliding into the booth across from him. And sometimes it takes an outsider to see what's hidden in plain sight. You were worried about your son, that's why you even stopped for food, right? You knew something was off. You just didn't know how off. The doctor asked how we caught it in time, William said. I told him about you, about what you noticed. He said the jaundice was subtle, most people would miss it. And that leg position thing? He called it the psoas sign, like you said. It's a classic indicator, but apparently, it's easy to overlook. You didn't overlook anything. They sat in silence for a moment, the diner quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. How did you know? William finally asked. I mean specifically, what made you so sure? Sarah smiled sadly. My husband, Marcus, was a paramedic. For 23 years, he came home with stories not to complain but to process, you know? He'd tell me about the close calls, the saves, the ones they lost. Appendicitis was one of the things that haunted him because it's so treatable if you catch it, but deadly if you don't. He saw too many cases where people waited too long or where the initial symptoms were dismissed. He taught you well. He taught me to pay attention, Sarah said, to really see people, not just look at them. That's what I do here, every day. I watch people. I notice things. It's probably why I'm good at this job. I remember that Mrs. Chun likes her tea lukewarm, not hot. I know Mr. Peterson will only sit at table 9 because the lighting is better for his crossword. And today, I noticed that your son was in serious trouble. William reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Sarah Martinez, I run Ashford Capital Management. We manage investments, primarily for high-net-worth individuals and organizations. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I don't take kindness lightly, and I don't forget debts. You don't owe me anything, Sarah said quickly. I'm just glad Tyler is okay. No, listen, William insisted. You gave me back my son. There's no repaying that, but I can honor it. I want to establish a scholarship fund in your name, the Sarah Martinez Healthcare Observation Scholarship. It would go to students studying nursing, emergency medicine, or paramedicine. People who want to do what you did today, see what others miss and act on it. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Mr. Ashford, that's incredibly generous, but I don't need. It's not about what you need, William said gently. It's about making sure more people learn to do what you do, to really look at the people around them. In Tyler's name and yours, we can help train a new generation of healthcare providers who understand that the most sophisticated medicine in the world means nothing without human connection and observation. Sarah wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Marcus would have loved that. He always said the best medicine was the kind that started with giving a damn about people. Your husband was a wise man. William stood, extending his hand. Thank you, Sarah. From the bottom of my heart, from my wife, from Tyler. Thank you for seeing what we all missed. Thank you for caring enough to speak up, even to a stranger. Sarah shook his hand, then pulled him into a brief hug instead. You take care of that boy, and maybe, she smiled, maybe take a few less phone calls when you're with him. William laughed, a sound that seemed to release weeks of tension. Already deleted half my contacts. My assistant is going to have to handle a lot more than she's used to. Tyler is my priority now. The merger can wait. Everything can wait. After William left, Sarah finished closing up the diner. She walked through her usual routine, checking the booths for forgotten items, making sure the coffee makers were off, setting the chairs on the tables for the morning cleaning crew. But tonight, everything felt different, charged with a significance she hadn't felt since Marcus died. In booth 7, she paused. This afternoon, in this spot, a boy had been hours away from a ruptured appendix. And now he was safe, recovering in a hospital bed, with his father finally paying attention to what mattered. Sarah thought about all the small moments that had led to this. Marcus's countless dinner table stories, the thousands of customers she'd observed over 15 years, the attention to detail that made her good at her job. All of it had converged in this one critical moment. As she locked the diner door behind her and walked to her car in the cooling evening air, Sarah felt Marcus's presence the way she sometimes did. Not as grief, but as gratitude. He taught her to see people, really see them, and today that gift had saved a life. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a letter in the mail. Inside was a formal announcement of the Sarah Martinez Healthcare Observation Scholarship, along with a personal note from William Ashford. Sarah, Tyler is home and recovering beautifully. He asked me to tell you that you're his hero. We've established the scholarship with an initial endowment that will support 5 students annually. The first recipient will be chosen next month, a young woman studying to be a paramedic, like your late husband. I hope this brings you joy. You've certainly brought it to our family. With eternal gratitude, William, Catherine, and Tyler Ashford. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest and let the tears come. Happy tears this time. The kind that carried both grief for what was lost and gratitude for what remained. The following Monday, Sarah was back at Miller's Diner, pouring coffee and taking orders, watching people with the same careful attention she always had. Because you never knew when those small observations would matter, when paying attention would make all the difference, when seeing what others missed would save a life. And in booth 7, where a scared boy had once sat in silence, Sarah placed a small framed quote she'd printed out. Words Marcus used to say, "The greatest medicine is paying attention. Everything else is just treatment." Customers would ask about it sometimes, and Sarah would smile and say, "Just a reminder to really see people. You'd be surprised what a difference it makes." And she'd think of Tyler Ashford, alive and well, because someone had cared enough to look beyond the surface, to notice the details, to speak up when it mattered. In the end, that's what saved him. Not sophisticated technology or expensive specialists, but simple human observation and the courage to act on it. The willingness of a waitress named Sarah Martinez to see what others had missed and to insist that someone listen. If this story moved you, reminded you to pay closer attention to the people around you, or inspired you to trust your instincts when something seems wrong, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories.